Drag racing snowmobiles is a high-intensity sport lasting about 5 to 6 seconds and involves strong muscular contractions, the anaerobic system, and the ATP-PCR system. To begin, the driver assumes a seated forward position with elbows in flexion and hands gripping the handlebars, while keeping the feet almost directly under the hips. As the light turns green, the driver quickly squeezes the throttle. Once the snowmobile crosses the starting line, the driver must extend his arms completely forward as the legs forcefully push the entire body backward. At this position, the driver uses his legs to hold his body up above the seat for the duration of the race. In order to hold a seated forward position, the driver activates his hip flexors to keep his hips in flexion. The biceps are contracted during this position to keep the elbows bent at a 45-degree angle while gripping the handlebars. To keep the chest forward and elbows back, the driver contracts the rhomboids, trapezius, and deltoids. Once the driver presses the throttle, the flexors in the forearm are contracted to brace the driver against a powerful acceleration. Once the snowmobile crosses the starting line, the driver then contracts his triceps to fully extend his arms. During this position, the driver must also create tension in the quadriceps to force his body backward. At this time, the driver remains above the seat for the rest of the race by using his hip flexors, hamstrings, and quadriceps. Strengthening the quadriceps, triceps, biceps, and rhomboids are essential for this activity. Push-ups are an example of an exercise that could be used for training the upper body muscles. Training the lower body muscles, such as the hamstrings, quadriceps, and hip flexors, should involve an exercise such as squats and lunges.
Hockey consists of short bouts of high-energy shifts involving primarily the anaerobic system. The ATP-PCR system is used during specific movements like the slap shot, because it only takes about a second to complete. The slap shot is an effective way of trying to score. To begin the movement, the player assumes a slightly forward lean and winds up, quickly bringing the stick back as far as possible, all the while transferring their body weight to their back foot. Once the stick reaches the highest point, the player then rotates his body, shifting most of his weight onto the stick, and brings the stick down to the ice as fast as possible, making contact with the puck. The movement ends once the puck has left the stick. To bring the stick back, the player contracts his deltoids, triceps, rhomboids, and trapezius as well as hip flexors to maintain a forward lean. Now that the stick has reached its highest point, the player must contract his biceps and pectoralis muscles to bring the stick down to the ice. It is important to activate abdominals during this movement to turn the body, keep balance, and provide as much power as possible. As he shifts his weight onto his front leg, he contracts his quadriceps and hip flexors. This is the end of the slap shot. Training for this sport and the slap shot in particular, players should strengthen their abdominals, pectoralis, triceps, biceps, and back. Exercises for these muscles could include pec flies, tricep extensions, and Russian twists with a medicine ball.
A back tuck is a high-intensity, fast-paced motion that takes only about a second to complete. It utilizes the anaerobic system due to the lack of oxygen required to perform the activity. It also involves using the ATP-PCR system because of its high intensity and short duration. To begin the back tuck, the gymnast first comes directly out of a back handspring. She extends her arms in an overhead position while performing a counter-movement vertical jump. At the peak of the jump, she then brings her knees up to her chest, preparing to launch her body backwards. While rotating backwards, she must maintain a tight position throughout the entire flip. In order to complete the landing, the gymnast must begin to extend her legs underneath her directly after the flip is finished. During the landing, the gymnast bends both knees while her feet simultaneously make contact with the ground. In this clip, she takes one step back to maintain her balance. Meanwhile, she extends her arms overhead to complete the routine. In order to extend her arms overhead, she must contract her anterior deltoids, trapezius, and triceps while using her hamstrings and quadriceps to complete the powerful vertical jump. Using her abdominals and hip flexors, she brings her knees to her chest while also using her hamstring to maintain knee flexion. She then activates her erector spinae and glutes to rotate backward. To begin the landing process, the gymnast must then eccentrically contract her abdominals, contract her quadriceps, and contract her glutes to extend her legs and resume an upright position. As her feet hit the floor, she begins a squatting position by contracting her hamstrings and hip flexors to absorb the shock. To come out of the squatting position, she contracts her quadriceps and erectae spinae, as well as eccentrically contracting her abdominals. Meanwhile, she extends her arms overhead once again, using her anterior deltoids, trapezius, and triceps. This completes the routine. Training for this activity involves strengthening and conditioning the abdominals, lower back, and shoulders. Some exercises that can be used include plyometrics, vertical jumps, and squats. Explosive and powerful movements are vital for performing this activity.